Chapter 1180. He looked as though he didn't like seeing her at such a time. Shui Yaoyao guessed that he was probably unhappy that she had interrupted his date and mentioned that she was his sister. After all, he had never been willing to admit it. Shui Yaoyao didn't make things difficult for Uncle Wang, nodding towards him as a greeting. Her retreating made Jiangzhou even more frustrated. Fortunately, he could still control himself. Even if he really wanted to ask her how he, Jiangzhou, was lacking compared to a boy. Did she know how cold it was outside and how long he had waited for her? As the car moved, the questions disappeared. Coco noticed Yao Yao's gaze following the car and glanced over his gaze clean. What are you looking at? Young Master Zhang's car. I wanted to greet him. Shui Yao Yao turned over. We seem to have interrupted his date just now. He doesn't look too good. He must be unhappy. Coco scoffed, the arrogance of a cat. Then let him be unhappy. Did he forget that you are his sister? Shui Yaoyao waved her hands. It doesn't count if I'm not his biological sister. Even if I'm not his biological sister, I should give in. Coco pulled his rabbit over. You are our sister Yao. Shui Yaoyao glanced at him, replying slowly. I remember I'm a month older than you, young man. F***CK. Why do you have to be so clear? This song is really nice. I'll use it for the background music in the next live stream. Coco cleverly changed the topic. Shui Yaoyao didn't continue, turning to ask. Didn't you say you were waiting for me? Where are the others? Fox Feng is probably held up. Uncle Yin and the rest are in the car. The only ones who aren't in are Lin Feng and Yun Yun. Uncle told us to wait for them here. Coco paused and said meaningfully. I have a feeling that the two of them want to talk about something alone. Otherwise, why aren't they out yet? Shui Yaoyao choked, but even she could sense that the relationship between Almighty Lin and Almighty Yun was different from before. Was it true that they were a couple? She could only ask this question with her eyes. Coco bit the rabbit ear in his arms and muttered. How scary. I'm the only straight guy left in the team. This will cause misunderstandings. Shui Yaoyao. To be honest, you're the one who looks the most like a gay in the team. However, it did take quite a long time. Shui Yaoyao took out her phone to check the time. Unexpectedly, when she turned on the screen, she saw 2 WeChat messages in silent mode. They were all sent to her by young Master Jiang. The first was position. The second message was 3 words. Come here. The message was sent 20 minutes ago. 20 minutes. At that time, she seemed to have just gotten off the elevator. Shui Yaoyao looked up at the main entrance on the west side. She thought about the car that had just driven past her. No wonder he looked a little angry. It was probably because she didn't go to the designated place according to his instructions, and made him wait for a few minutes on the 10th. She knew Jiangzhou. Except for the person he wanted to wait for, he was willing to pay the time. If he didn't want to wait, he probably felt that it wasn't worth it. She had probably wasted his time just now. But Shui Yaoyao couldn't figure out why he was looking for her. Was it because he called her brother, just now? It was highly possible. Shui Yaoyao looked at the WeChat page. She wanted to reply, but since he had already left and she was angry, there was no point in replying. Chapter 1181. The car was silent. The chauffeur could sense that his young master wasn't in a good mood. He had intended to return to the Jiang family, but his young master had changed his mind and wanted to return to his own place. After Jiangzhou returned to his room, he didn't turn on the lights. Instead, he walked to the sofa in the living room and sat down, the back of his head resting on the sofa as he stared at the ceiling. He had never done such a thing before. However, he didn't know why today was different from usual. The surroundings were too quiet. It was so quiet that he didn't know what he was doing. Even his eyes were a little empty. When he closed his eyes and opened them again, he seemed to have thought of something. He suddenly stood up and kicked the trash can to vent his anger. After a loud bang, everything returned to silence. He sat there, his brows furrowed. The esports ticket that had been placed beside his hand was such an eyesore. It was so eyesore that every time he saw it, he would think of certain scenes. It was really uncomfortable. He crumpled the ticket with his fingers. This series of actions caused a loud noise. It was clear that Jiangzhou was really unhappy. Ever since he had started the company, he rarely lost his temper like this. But when he was in school, he had been stubborn. Whenever he had a problem with his father, he would kick things to vent his anger. At that time, she was the only one who knew how he had vented his anger. Now, Jiangzhou lifted his head to look at the ceiling, his eyes even more empty than before. No one knew what he was thinking. He was completely silent, the silence as though he wasn't in the room. The crowd outside the entertainment department was almost gone. Coco and Shui Yaoyao were in their uniforms, leaning against the wall as they waited. I'll send them a message. In the end, Coco couldn't take it anymore, his fingers typing on his phone. At this moment, Yunhu was held up by the media, mainly because his return was a hot topic. The platform would definitely interview as many people as they could. Lin Feng sat in the lounge waiting. He felt that it was taking too long, so he opened a game on his phone. Because there was only a glass door, the soundproofing wasn't very good. He could still vaguely hear the interview question. Why did you decide to come back? I heard that once Almighty Yun missed his school abroad, it would be hard to get in again. They've reserved a spot for 3 months. If I don't come back to be with my Supreme Alliance teammates, I'll probably have regrets for the rest of my life. Yunhu paused. Compared to my studies, there's someone more important to me here. Damn. This was Lin Feng's first reaction. After all, every time Yunhu said that, the reporters would definitely link them together. As expected, the interviewer's voice rose. Could the most important person be our Lord Lin Feng? Lin Feng reached out and rubbed his ears. There was really no creativity in the interview at all. Yunhu was very cooperative. MMH, he replied. Everyone in the team is important. Almighty Yun is being bureaucratic again. Alright, I won't waste any more of Almighty Yun's time. Master Lin Feng should have been waiting there for a long time. When Lin Feng heard this, he thought to himself, "You've finally found a topic to write a couple about, right?" Indeed, the topic of the CP would definitely be read more than the news of Almighty Yin returning to China alone. The interview was over. Chapter 1182. His broad shoulders made the simple black uniform look straight and stylish. It was no wonder so many people wanted to interview him. Lin Feng stuffed his phone into his pocket and was about to stand up. The person who was walking over suddenly bent down and landed in front of him. He placed his left hand on the chair he was sitting on and said slowly, "Why are you in a hurry?" In an instant, Lin Feng seemed to be enveloped by him. The man's beautiful chin appeared in front of him, accentuating the black uniform. He felt that the distance was a little too close. He adjusted himself instinctively and wanted to stand up. "Nonsense, of course I'm in a hurry. Coco and the rest have been waiting outside for a long time. They even sent me a message. Let's go, let's go." With that, Lin Feng took a step forward. "Wait a minute." Yunhu spoke again, his tone calm. "Ever since I came back, you didn't seem to express anything." Express anything? Bring him out for a meal or a night at the internet cafe. This was just the beginning. Lin Feng was still standing there thinking. Yunhu had already stretched his hand out. Lin Feng didn't know what he wanted to do, or if he was crazy. He leaned forward and fiddled with Yunhu's arm. In that instant, the aura from his body intensified. Lin Feng said, F***CK. What exactly do you want to do? There was a hint of laughter in his tone. Basically, when guys got along, they would have a catchphrase. Why? I'm scared. Yunhu was still adjusting. His beautiful brows arched slightly as he moved both of Lin Feng's arms into a perfect arc. Lin Feng smirked. I'm scared. Let me tell you, I have fans too. That's right, you have many fans, Almighty Lin Feng. When Yunhu said this, his tone was calm and obviously playful. A word rolled out of Lin Feng's throat. He chuckled and scolded, Scram. After a trip abroad, did he not even know how to speak properly? And what was he trying to do? Lin Feng lowered his lids and looked at his posture. He didn't know that his breath was already on Yunhu's neck. He still felt uncomfortable and wanted to move. This was a little too close. But he pressed down on his wrist. Then Yunhu bent down and crawled in from the bottom up. His entire body appeared in the arc formed by his arms. Lin Feng's head was still lowered, and the other party's actions caught him off guard. Even his thin lips touched the other party's ear. The cool sensation was soft, and scary. Holy sh*t, what kind of position is this? Also, did he kiss Yin Hu's ear just now? Lin Feng's eyes widened. His first reaction was to turn his face away. Otherwise, who knew where his lips would touch? Really, your sister? Lin Feng's heart clearly couldn't calm down. His lips still lingered on that unusual feeling. Although it was cold, her lips felt a little hot. She didn't know why. Lin Feng clenched his fists tightly. Even his fingertips felt intense. F***ck me. Calm down, it's just a touch, a light brush, it shouldn't be a big deal. Lin Feng coughed lightly. Chapter 1183. In an instant, Lin Feng's face turned red. F***ck. Did your language teacher teach you? Do you know how to use adjectives? I just touched you, that's a touch, bro. Lin Feng had never felt so awkward before. Oh. Yin Hu replied nonchalantly. Then he laughed. His laughter seemed to travel from his ears to his heart. The two of them were really too close. This kind of posture. Lin Feng wanted to explode again. He inhaled deeply. Also, what are you doing? It would be weird if I didn't touch your ear while hugging you. That's right. Yin Hu had made a circle with his hands before going in. They were so close that Lin Feng was hugging him. Because they were so close, Lin Feng could even feel the rise and fall of his chest when his heart beat. He wanted to let go, his scalp tingling. It was all because the man's hormones were too strong. Yin Hu wouldn't give him the chance. He hugged him like a good brother. Then he lowered his head and whispered into his ear. Why? Didn't you cry when I went overseas? Now that I'm back, I'm hugging you to comfort you. Lin Feng couldn't find fault with Yin Hu. After all, the hug didn't have any meaning. Lin Feng pushed him away. Comfort my **s. I don't need it. If you mention the airport again, I'll blacklist you. Did you hear me? Didn't I say that I have fans too? I'll get my army of fans to destroy you. You're amazing. Yin Hu was still laughing after being pushed away. It was a natural interaction. But as for why Yin Hu took the opportunity to do something, only he knew. After leaving the country, Yin Hu's thoughts changed. In the past, he was afraid to express his thoughts because he would hate him so much that he wouldn't even want to meet him. Now Yin Hu only had one thought. To turn him gay. So what if he was straight? He didn't think about it, but it didn't mean that others didn't. Yin Hu gradually understood that it was one thing to convince him in his heart, but it was another thing to watch him walk closer to someone else and be unable to control himself. Since Supreme Alliance could be reformed, nothing was impossible between the two of them. Even if it was impossible, he would make everything possible. Lin Feng didn't know what Yin Hu was thinking about. He just felt an indescribable heat from the small space they were in. Damn it, was today's weather forecast a lie? Didn't he tell them that the weather would turn cold after autumn? He even reminded them to wear more clothes? Why is it so hot? Lin Feng turned his head away. After putting some distance between them, he felt much better. Go down. Yin Hu's voice came from behind him. Lin Feng replied with an N. Both of them were wearing black uniforms with silver logos. No matter how one looked at them, they looked cool and dashing. There were still fans waiting outside. Indeed, the reason there were so many fans at the venue was because Yin Hu was back. They wanted to take a look, which was why they hadn't left yet. Lin Feng hadn't expected there to be so many people there, and they were all Yin Hu's fans. He arched a brow. When the fans saw that the two of them came out together, they cheered even more. Chapter 1184. This girl was special. Perhaps others treated Yin Hu like a fan towards their idol. But this girl was different. During Yin Hu's live stream, she had smashed many planes. That wasn't all. She had given other fans mini red packets, just to be the representative to send flowers. The atmosphere was just right. Sometimes the hearts of fans were really strange. They felt that no one was worthy of their idol, but when they received something substantial, they would gradually change and lean towards the person who gave them benefits. After all, idols were untouchable and the girl was by their side. Most importantly, she was beautiful and rich. Hence, no matter what she did, they wouldn't think it was too much. They even felt that her way of chasing someone was a little flirtatious. Some fans only hoped that Almighty Yin would accept this bouquet of flowers. Even the naive Lin Feng felt that the atmosphere wasn't like the usual atmosphere of a fan meeting. Moreover, Yin Hu could see through the entire situation with one glance. The girl was also in the online circle, but she wasn't an esports player. Perhaps she really liked him, but he had rejected her a long time ago. But there were some people who wouldn't take the rejection seriously. Instead, they would lie and say that they were close. The more ambiguous and fake her words, the more Yin Hu felt conflicted. During that period of time, he had been busy overseas and hadn't asked Orange Horse to ban her since it wasn't a big deal. Now, it seemed like he had underestimated some people's thoughts. Yin Hu arched a brow, glancing at the bouquet near him. He stuffed a hand into his pocket and laughed. Don't you know that people with boyfriends can't accept flowers from others? People with boyfriends? In that instant, all the fans froze. There were still the reporters who hadn't left. Lin Feng's first reaction was F***ck. Did Yin Hu go crazy when he was in love? What was the tolerance in China? What was he trying to do? It wouldn't be good for his boyfriend if he made it public. Lin Feng could almost imagine the explosion on the official website that night. Fox Feng wouldn't be able to sleep well. Supreme Alliance had been going against the trend recently. They should get someone to take a look at their feng shui. But that was how the esports industry was. Love could sometimes turn into harm. Lin Feng had many thoughts, one after another surfacing in his mind. But the next second, there was a bouquet in his arms. What was going on? Lin Feng was a little stunned. He wanted to curse, but then he felt that there were too many people. Holding the flowers with one hand, he felt that he was a little stupid. Damn you, why did you give me my flower? Did he look like a follower? Yin Hu replied slowly. Isn't it natural for a fan to send flowers to her boyfriend? What the F***ck? What the F***ck? Lin Feng was also hit. His face was hot. Who's your boyfriend? Yin Hu arched a brow. The online group counts. Why? I've only left the country once and you don't want me as your CP anymore. Haven't you heard of King of Storms Road? You. At this time, Lin Feng also understood that the other party was joking. Using this method to avoid direct confrontation with the fans was not a bad idea. But F***ck, why was his heart beating so fast just now? Chapter 1185. It's nothing, it's indeed King Feng Yun. I'll accept the flowers from the one below, Lin Feng said, reaching out and placing his arm over Yin Hu's shoulder. Both of them broke into smiles, unbridled, allowing the reporters to take photos. The more they acted like this, the less people would think there was anything going on between them. Being a couple wasn't a big deal in the esports industry. It was often used as a joke. Only the girl felt a little uncomfortable in her heart, but she didn't show it on her face. She looked at the two of them and lowered her head to send a message to a few other fans she was close with. They can't really be together, right? Impossible, it's a joke. Even if they are together, it doesn't matter. I'm a fan of this couple. The girl raised her hand. It's nothing, I just feel a little disappointed. That's true, Almighty Yin actually gave your flowers to someone else after receiving them. I feel like the two of you are too detached. Almighty Yin hasn't shown any response from the beginning. To be honest, I feel a little awkward watching you send flowers. How can you say that? Isn't it because we like him? That's right. After listening to their conversation, the fourth girl didn't speak. Actually, she was a little confused. Back then, when she joined the chat group, it was because she wanted Almighty Yin to be better. Why did things change in the end? Unknowingly, someone had changed. She had been standing close to Almighty Yin and judging from his expression, he didn't like the flowers, which was why she realized she had gone overboard. She had been clamoring for Almighty Yin to accept her as a friend since they were all fans and would join in the commotion. But thinking about it, what was the difference between this and forcing someone to marry Almighty Yin? If Almighty Yin wanted to date, he could do it himself. They were causing a commotion in a public place. Fortunately, Almighty Lin was there. It was a good way to divert attention. If not, Almighty Yin accepting the flowers would be on the news the next day. Now they were at the crucial moment of the Asian Cup. They were still thinking about private matters. Was this really okay? Who was the one who said from the start that if one liked an idol, one had to be closer to his work and stay away from his private life? Why did they forget why they liked him in the first place? Now, she actually wanted him to live according to her own imagination. That person thought about it for a moment, and finally decided to leave the group. It wasn't because of anything else, but because she didn't want to become a person that even she didn't recognize in the end. On the other side, Lin Feng's hand was placed on Yinhu's shoulder. He was very adept at dealing with the media. However, the warmth on his face couldn't be deceived. Yinhu created trouble for him the moment he came back. That was enough. Only when they entered the elevator did Lin Feng retract his hand. He coughed and looked at the flower in his left hand. He wanted to return it to its owner. Unexpectedly, Yinhu didn't accept it. Why would a man like me need flowers? Besides, didn't I give it to you just now, boyfriend? Yinhu said the last 3 words very slowly, almost with pauses between each word. Lin Feng wanted to curse again, but in the end he could only spit out. F***ck, are you addicted to playing? Yinhu watched as the elevator slid down to the first floor. He walked out first and glanced at the flower in Lin Feng's arms. It suits you. Lin Feng wanted to say that it didn't suit him. It wasn't a big deal for a man like him to hold a flower, but it was a big deal for a man like him to hold it. However, he couldn't throw the flower away. If he did, who knew what the media would write? He carried it on his shoulder, a cigarette dangling from his mouth. He was very mischievous. Honestly, if it wasn't for Lin Feng's beautiful face and straightforward behavior, he would have been a pure man who grew up in the alleys of Jiang City. The 2 of them were dressed in their uniforms, and one of them was carrying a bouquet of flowers. It was definitely eye-catching. Shui Yaoyao raised her head and saw the 2 young masters. She seemed to reach out and wave at them. Then she shifted her gaze to the bouquet Lin Feng was carrying, her eyes full of interest. Coco was listening to the song and was shocked by this scene. He asked instinctively, "You guys are progressing so fast?" What did they mean by progressing? Lin Feng blushed. F***ck, stop making wild guesses. This is a gift from a fan. Oh, Coco bit the rabbit's ear in his arms. I've never received flowers from a fan before. Almighty Lin Feng. Can you explain why Almighty Yin is written on the bouquet? Lin Feng thought, hey, aren't you excited? He pulled Coco over and started playing with him. Shui Yaoyao thought he was shy. Yinhu's gaze was gentle. He turned over. Where's Boss Feng? He's probably still busy. Fox Feng asked us to bring you to the car first. We've already booked a place for dinner. You can go all out today. Coco's face was still red when he said this. He was obviously happy. On this day, there was no one who was unhappy. But even so, Fengyi was still thinking of ways to contact her. However, the location of the call couldn't be found. Actually, it wasn't because Bojio didn't want to pick up the call. Instead, they were discovered the moment they finished their call. Prince was the first to react because the aura of the person standing with his back facing the light was too strong. He howled. He had wanted his brother to escape since they weren't there, and it wasn't easy to punish them. Unexpectedly, before he could move, a gaze swept over him. Other than coldness, he couldn't feel any other aura. In that instant, Prince froze in midair. His limbs were stiff, much less his scalp. Chapter 1186. Very quickly, his premonition was proven true. The person behind him spoke with a unique indifference and nobility. Hand him over to the old general and let him handle it. Yes. Magician started to lead him away. Prince's eyes widened. F***ck, why did everyone know about his sudden appearance? Stop joking, he had already informed his uncle. Even his uncle wasn't sure which team he was in. What exactly was going on? Magician could tell what Prince was thinking from his expression. Brother, you're still too inexperienced. You're still young and inexperienced. Without the 2 of them, Chinemo glanced down at the person in front of him. Chinemo lowered his lids and looked at the person in front of him. He arched a brow and after a moment he said, "Hand over the thing in your hand." Bojio wanted to make up for it. "What is it?" Chinemo reached out and grabbed her wrist, which was in her pocket. Then he pulled up her sleeves and pushed them up. Under his palms was her smooth skin. It was very warm, which made his gaze deepen. Bojio's face heated up. She wasn't sure if it was because of the coldness from his hand, or because of her guilt. Since she knew she wasn't going to run away with the phone, she decided to be honest. I didn't do anything to harm the team, and I didn't contact Grandfather Butler. Regardless of who you contacted, you aren't allowed to bring any communication devices here. Chin Mo took the phone out from her sleeves. He smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. You guys are really capable. It wasn't a compliment. Bojio felt that she had to push the blame away. Since Prince had the old general's protection, he shouldn't be afraid. It's mainly because of Prince's connections. That was the truth. Oh, Chin Mo replied slowly. Your friend will definitely cry if he hears that. Bojio replied honestly. During a team battle, buying teammates is an appropriate way to ensure one's survival. It's also a strategy. What do you think are the chances of you surviving if you fall into my hands? Chin Mo asked coldly. Bojio coughed. I won't do it a second time. Chin Mo didn't reply. Bojio was about to move. Just then Chin Mo spoke again. Come over. It's so close, and you still want to go over? Bojio glanced up at the person in front of her and scanned the surroundings. When she realized that no one else knew, she roughly understood the Almighty's intentions. The Almighty definitely wanted her to coax him. Definitely. She knew very well what kind of thoughts those proud little princesses in the novels usually had. Bojio smiled. She opened her arms and hugged his waist. Even though her face was dark, there was an indescribable youthful energy around her. Chin Mo paused. Then he reached out and hugged her. He was probably satisfied. His brows relaxed. The more she looked at him, the cuter he was. Bojio wanted to stretch her claws and take advantage of him since it was a rare opportunity. Who would have thought that before she could even move her hand, that familiar breath landed behind her ear? Unhurriedly he said, 10 laps with weights. Bojio. Wasn't he acting coquettishly just now? What dream are you having again? Chin Mo pinched the youngster's face. He didn't use much strength. It was more like he was spoiling her, but his words had shattered her fantasy. Chapter 1187. Bojio was confused. It would be great if the Almighty could just be his pretty boy quietly. Why did he have to speak? It wasn't beautiful at all. The moment she thought about it, her face was lifted up by him. He asked casually, do you want to kiss? Kiss. No. Even though that face looked very noble and abstinent when she looked at it up close, she resisted the charm and turned her face away a little. But she couldn't avoid it. He looked at her for a long time. Then his lips suddenly curled up. He lowered his head, and his deep gaze landed on her lips. Then he moved closer. His intention was clear. Bojio's face heated up from his breath. She stayed in that position and placed her lips on the corner of his mouth. It felt soft. He didn't move. He seemed to be allowing her to kiss him, a faint smile on his face. It was obvious that he wanted her to do whatever she wanted. Bojio arched a brow. Just as she was about to move, her waist was lifted. His lips kissed her lightly. It was so lingering that it made her heart tremble. When the numbness spread, her legs turned soft. Fortunately, he was holding on to her waist. The kiss wasn't fierce. It was gentle, as though he was tasting something. Bojio's breathing was a mess. After all, the hand that went into her waist couldn't be ignored. When he saw her breathing on his shoulder, he let go and pulled a distance away from her. Bojio thought that was it, and was about to open her mouth. The next second he pushed her against the tree. He tilted his head slightly and kissed her. This time, it was so domineering that she couldn't resist. Bojio felt as though her entire body was on fire. When her skin touched his fingers, the slight chill and numbness made her heart beat wildly. When it surged up from her tailbone, she couldn't bear the heavy burden. She felt the breath on her lips. It was so hot and tempting. Hence, her thoughts were burned away. Her body trembled in his arms. Her heart felt as though there was a cat scratching its claws. It was so ticklish that she could only reach out and grab his arm. He seemed to have sensed her reaction. He gradually stopped. When her breathing stabilized, he leaned over again. He looked at the person in front of him. His thin lips were slightly red. His eyes seemed to be watery. He almost couldn't control himself. Idiot. Bojo was still puzzled. How was she stupid? The Almighty always scolded her for no reason. Whenever he was arrogant, he would be like that. Why are you so good-looking? Just looking at you makes me want to kiss you. His fingers touched her face again. Their breaths were still together. After being kissed again, Bojo felt that the Almighty she had managed to woo was exceptionally sweet. He even knew how to praise her. He stretched out his arms and hugged her with a devilish look on his face. Chin Mo didn't reject her. He unbuttoned his military jacket and pulled her into his arms. His well-defined chin rested on the youngster's head. He had probably given all his patience and gentleness to one person. Even his back view seemed different from usual. It was very quiet because they were in the forest. Bojo could hear the beating of his heart. His heartbeat was as urgent as hers. Gradually, her strength lessened. Neither of them spoke. That was the feeling after falling in love. It was as if the air was filled with the sweetness of lemon. Chapter 1188. But this wasn't the right place to date. In the military, there were many things Chin Mo had to worry about. Their embrace was interrupted by the sound of footsteps coming from afar. Chin Mo dragged her directly to the training ground for weighted running. Her heartbeat hadn't calmed down yet. All sorts of emotions were running through her. She and the Almighty were really in love now, right? That should be it. They were dating without any grudges. Bojo carried her things and ran forward as though she was sleepwalking. This time, she didn't seem to have done anything for the Almighty to accept her. It was a pity she hadn't even used her tricks. But she would probably be able to take advantage of him in the future. Now she had to confirm their relationship. Once the overseas mission was over and she dealt with those people, she would find a chance to propose to the Almighty. Bojo's thoughts were always farsighted. She was different from others when she ran with weights. Her steps were steady and she was familiar with conserving her energy. Hence, from afar, she was still a handsome youngster. But for some reason, her eyes kept glancing to the side. Her gaze swept past his perfect chin and landed on his thin lips, a layer of light. This was the kind of person who had kissed her just a moment ago. Bojo blushed, her heart racing. She wanted to kiss him back, but she didn't have the chance. Prince was basically done with his scolding. After he was brought back, he received the same punishment. The military intercepted their messages and knew they didn't send any special messages. But such a mistake still had to be punished. In the military, punishment wouldn't be spared just because of their status. As a depressed prince, he couldn't understand why the fellow who was running with weights was so happy after being punished. Since when did this person become so enlightened? Standing not far away, Chin Mo, who was dressed in his military uniform, seemed to be laughing silently. Magician, who was walking over, was startled by the laughter and stopped in his tracks. What was going on? In reality, Chin Mo was restraining himself since he couldn't be too obvious. Perhaps he didn't realize that the corners of his lips had never moved down. Magician felt his scalp go numb. He gulped and asked, "Boss, are you in a good mood?" The devil had never smiled in such a way before. It was a piercing sight. He thought that the boss would just glance at him. Who would have thought that the answer he got would be a smiling N? Magician couldn't stand it anymore. Because of number 10 who was punished to run? Chin Mo glanced over, the smile still in his eyes. "Why are you so concerned about my private life?" Magician immediately stood up, his heel touching the ground. "No, I don't care. Whoever dared to care would die." Chin Mo retracted his gaze and looked at the figure that was still running. He smiled again, like the moon in the night, as though he wasn't a subordinate in front of him. There was really no end to it. Magician stood at the side, feeling that his boss was showing off. That smile really made him want to curse. "Boss, we are still a group of single dogs, please don't be like this." It wasn't easy for him to stop laughing. It was the old general who had something to discuss with boss. Before he left, the boss tossed him a bunch of keys. "After a certain someone finishes her run, ask her to take a shower in my room." Chapter 1189. Prince was still oblivious to what had happened. When he saw the soldier leading him, he stood there motionless as though he had been petrified. His expression was hard to describe. Prince was wondering if he should continue running since it was lonely without anyone watching him. Magician couldn't care less about this crown prince. His boss had actually asked number 10 to go to his room to take a bath. It was like a bolt from the blue. Magician felt that he needed some peace and quiet. It was obvious that his boss didn't intend to hide it from them, but it was only limited to their operation team. As for the others in the military, it was better not to know about their relationship. Magician's heart was tormented, especially when the youngster ran over with a thin layer of sweat. "Where's Captain?" Magician felt as though he had eaten too much, but he continued to hold on to the key, acting natural. "Number 10. Here." Bojio straightened. Even though her voice was lazy, she still followed the rules of the military. Magician turned. "Follow me." They would talk when there was only the two of them. Bojio arched a brow, following him. Prince was still running. He wanted to finish his run as soon as possible, so that he could listen in. Everyone had a gossipy heart. Magician walked in front. He coughed lightly and lowered his voice. "Boss wants you to take a shower in his room." "All right." Bojio had a white towel around her neck. She laughed when she heard his words. Magician. What a torture. He was still the one passing the message. This reminded him of the times when he had been in junior high. The people sitting in front and behind him would always ask him to pass small notes. Honestly, didn't those in love consider the dignity of single dogs like him? It was obvious that Bojio couldn't be bothered with his feelings at this moment. Getting the Almighty was the happiest thing. When Magician turned back, the person behind him was still laughing. Really, he shouldn't have accepted this job. Magician paused. Don't be so obvious in the military. They were about to go on a mission and many people were watching their captain. Bojio smiled. Don't worry, I won't. There must be people asking about your relationship with Captain, right? Magician felt that as someone with experience, he had to comfort her. Bojio caressed her chin. Indeed. Then how did you answer? Magician thought to himself. This person should know his limits. Bojio lifted her lips, looking devilish. Family. 2 words. Magician was once again pinned to the ground. He shouldn't have asked such a question. He was practically asking for a dog to eat. Didn't he say that he had a sense of propriety? Bojio glanced at Magician's pale face and reached out to pat his shoulder. There are many types of family members. It might not be the type you are thinking of. But do you want to hear how I managed to woo the Almighty? Magician refused to listen further, putting on a dignified look. I'll give you the key. You can go yourself. With that, he ran off in tears. It was too cruel. Bojio looked at the key in her hand. She turned it around twice, still not satisfied. She finally knew what it meant to like someone. Liking someone was when you wanted the whole world to know that you were together with him. Chapter 1190. Her hands were itching. In the past, if she had a phone, she would have posted an announcement on her official Weibo account. But now, without electronic products, she wasn't able to express her joy. The time on her wrist was still moving. Bojio glanced at it. There was still some time before the jungle PK. She walked around the side and towards the Lamborghini. At this moment, there wasn't anyone near the car. Actually, other than Bojio, there weren't many people who dared to appear nearby. Bojio used her voice to unlock the car lazily. She reached out to open the car door and sat inside. The intelligence system sent a wave of excitement. But the system still had a memory. After the previous 2 replies, Little Blackie didn't expect its owner to drive it away. I chased him. Bojio tapped her fingers on the steering wheel and laughed arrogantly. Isn't Daddy amazing? For the first time, Little Blackie didn't want to speak. What exactly was Master here for? The Almighty even praised me. You should know that it isn't easy for someone like the Almighty to praise someone. Bojio continued. Do you think I should express something? I can't get high in the military. Why don't I ask Grandfather Butler to propose marriage to the Yin family? They are overseas as well. It would be more convenient. Little Blackie. Why did you want to go ahead the moment you chased him? It had never seen such a master before. The rearview mirror reflected the youngster's image. Little Blackie didn't know what her master was thinking about. Suddenly, she broke into a smile and pressed her face against the steering wheel. She tossed and turned before spitting out. The feeling of being in love isn't bad. It's a pity you're a robot. You probably won't be able to experience it for the rest of your life. As a car, Little Blackie couldn't take it anymore. Master, did you specially come here to show off your love? MMH. The youngster held her chin and smiled. The Almighty's kissing skills aren't bad either. I should marry him as soon as possible. Little Blackie. It didn't want to listen. It wanted to activate the automatic blocking program. Wait a minute, F***CK. Did Master press a button just now? It couldn't turn off automatically? Was she planning to let it listen from the start? Master, where was your humanity? It wasn't easy for Bojio to find someone who listened to her. Of course she wouldn't let it go. Even if it was a car and not a person, she was going to share it with him. Her reaction was indeed rare. The heat on her face had not subsided since the beginning, and the sound of her heartbeat did not decrease even after they parted. They had just met, but she wanted to hear that person's voice again. That person had many identities. He was an esports god loved by countless people, a young major general with excellent marksmanship, and an expert criminal psychologist. After these identities faded away, he had only one identity, her boyfriend. Her boyfriend. Just the thought of it filled Bojio with sweetness. Even her smile was clearer than usual. She lazily leaned against the seat, her arms casually crossed. Dressed in a black combat uniform, she still looked very handsome. She had the vitality of a young man, but she couldn't help but feel happy. Chinemo couldn't hold it in either. Chapter 1191. Chinmo's smile didn't matter. The old general, who was sitting opposite him, almost got scalded by the tea in his mouth. Even his heart trembled. He turned and exchanged glances with the adjutant beside him. He was obviously asking what was wrong with him. The adjutant shook his head slightly, still in a daze. He was similarly shocked. In the past, the almighty devil would smile, but every time he did, it was vague. That kind of smile was definitely not a good thing. It was when he wanted to kick someone out of the army, throw some trouble for the chief to deal with, or anger the regiment commander who was stationed opposite him. In short, it was not a smile in the real sense of the word. Now, the adjutant felt as though his eyes were about to be blinded. The main thing was that the almighty devil didn't stop smiling. He didn't know what he was thinking. Cough. The old general finally couldn't take it anymore. He placed his fist by his lips and pretended to ask casually, "Are you in a good mood today?" "Am I?" When Chinemo asked, the smile on his face disappeared. The old general didn't want to say anything else. "How dare you ask me? I'm already smiling so much. What do you think?" But such straightforward words could only be mocked in his heart. Did something good happen? The old general knew that he had to understand Chinmo's thoughts before he went out for a mission. Chinemo took a sip of tea and replied casually, "Same as usual." Damn it. Who would believe such a lie if it was told? The old general had a bad temper, but he couldn't do anything in front of Chinemo. He treasured talents too much. "I asked my nephew just now. He isn't sensible. He didn't make any big mistakes, but the unit allows such small mistakes. Everything is done according to the rules, and he will be punished accordingly." After hearing the bureau chief's words, Chinemo suddenly said, "A little." What? The old general thought he was using the opportunity to kick his nephew away. Honestly, it wasn't a big deal if he really kicked him away. The mission was too dangerous. Chinmo's voice was calm. "Don't let him go to any small forest in the future. It will cause misunderstandings." The old general was confused. He didn't understand why he said that, but it was a small matter. "I'll get the adjutant to talk to him later. What do you think of his condition?" This was what the old general wanted to ask. Chinemo placed his teacup down. "Very suitable." 3 words, no more, no less. The old commander had mixed feelings for a moment. Soldiers that Chinemo took a liking to were always good soldiers. However, It also meant that he had to carry out that overseas mission. Qin Mo could sense the old general's thoughts. His gaze wasn't as bright as before. Instead, it was as dark as the night, giving off a sense of relief. Don't worry, once I bring my soldiers out, I will bring them all back. Actually, I already had a premonition. The old general laughed and sighed. To be honest, I'm quite proud that our Yi family has such a soldier. Don't think that he's just a hooligan. He really likes to stay in the army. I've seen his information. You guys have a pattern in selecting people. When he finished close combat and came out of the army, a psychiatrist contacted him in advance. Yes. Qin Mo didn't deny it. His psychological condition isn't bad. He has 70% more self-defense awareness than the other fighting champions. The old general smiled and said, "What exactly do you like about him?" "Skills and marksmanship. Of course, these aren't the main points. Most importantly, he gives off a feeling just by standing there," Qin Mo said slowly. The old general hadn't expected Qin Mo to pick his nephew because of his aura. Instantly, his interest was piqued. "What feeling?" "I'm rich, I'm the crown prince." Qin Mo placed his teacup down. The old general choked with his words. This really wasn't a compliment? Why did it feel like this cold fellow was describing a nouveau riche? There are many people in the army, but once we are overseas, we need to consider all aspects. We need to pick the best out of the best. These people can't have a strong military aura on them. If not, they will be recognized the moment they disguise themselves. Their psychological qualities are even more important. After all, we are facing a hypnotist this time. Mercenary organizations also look at people's appearances. Qin Mo looked at the old general. Your nephew is smart, and with his unique aura, he is very suitable for this mission. The old general knew that the decisions of the personnel were approved by the higher-ups. When exactly do we set off? Qin Mo's gaze was calm. At 2 in the morning the day after tomorrow, the operation team will disappear from the army with the excuse of a military exercise. It's a level 1 overseas mission, and it isn't suitable to expose your identity there. Hence, even the troops have to keep it a secret. I understand, I'll arrange everything. At this point, the old commander raised his hand and patted his shoulder. I'll leave Yilong to you. Qin Mo stood up and straightened his military cap. His gaze was dark and his reply was a military salute. On the other side, Bojiu had changed into a new combat uniform after her shower. She had brought all the equipment, and even her shoes had been changed to brown military equipment. A German military knife hung behind her waist. She was checking the ammunition for the last time. The ammunition wasn't real. It was specially used by the army for military exercises. If it hit someone, they would automatically be knocked out. But the impact was still there. It would hurt a little when it hit her face. She reached out and lifted the black mask on her face, successfully covering her young and handsome face. Only a pair of extremely dark eyes could be seen. At this moment, the sky outside had darkened. Bojiu held her rifle with one hand and entered the forest from the back of the training ground. Other than Crown Prince, no one else had seen her whereabouts. Prince had been running with weights as punishment. When he saw the slender figure about to enter the area, he ran over and said, I have a feeling that the devil is hostile towards me. Can you persuade your cousin? I'm just an accomplice and you're the main culprit. How am I supposed to eat if I have to run so many laps? Bojiu replied insincerely, if you don't eat dinner, you can lose weight. Also, you're thinking too much. Captain is so handsome. Why would he be hostile towards you? How would I know? Prince was puzzled too, but as a good roommate, he had to remind the youngster. Pay attention when you go in. I think with that guy's sniping skills, he might be hiding there and waiting to shoot you in the head. Alright, have you played online games before? You'll get lucky and get chicken dinner. That's the logic. Don't die the moment you land. Chapter 1192. Stop bragging. You're younger than me. How can you be more experienced than me? Prince replied nonchalantly. Bojiu shrugged. Without another word, she leaped into the forest. Her speed was shocking. The crown prince, who had just raised his head, swallowed hard. He had wanted to talk to the other party, but it was really annoying for him to run alone while carrying weights. However, this guy really didn't have much of a chance of winning against that team's sniper. The new sniper thought the same way. He had entered the forest earlier than Bojio. They had discussed and decided to enter from different entrances, so that it would be easier to fight. That way, no one would be at a disadvantage. But when he had sent the sniper in, his roommate had said, "Are you really going to fight him? Honestly, he's just a technical soldier. He can't be compared to you. There's no point in fighting him. It's purely to make him back off. It's also to let him know that in the last drill, he single-handedly defeated the team over there because of the sniper's cooperation. If this person doesn't even know these 2 points and stays in the army just because of his connections, there will be a lot of drawbacks when carrying out missions." Needless to say, the sniper was right. His roommate didn't stop him. The temperature in the forest was slightly lower than the training ground. It was because of the vegetation. The lush trees stood quietly, and the tips of the trees that seemed to pierce through the sky swayed gently with the breeze. The exposed roots on the ground intertwined with each other and grew intertwined, like brown pythons entwining together, making love to each other. In the depths of the dense and serene forest, the sounds of birds and insects could be heard from time to time. It gave the originally dull forest a mysterious vibe. Bojio was dressed in the same color combat uniform. She held the rifle in her hands and bent her body to search for the best shooting spot. At this moment, the two of them didn't know that besides them, there was another group of mercenaries planning to invade from the north. There was this group of mercenaries because of the hostage rescue. It was all because of the hostage rescue. When Kuang, who was outside the border, heard the news, he opened his eyes that had been in deep sleep. Then he pushed the person beside him away. As the boss of an organization, he didn't look ferocious at all. He was in his 40s, and he was wearing a white coat. It was easy for people to put down their guard. However, it was this person who, as a psychiatrist, used his knowledge to kill many people. This case was reported by many police departments, because the way he killed people was too horrifying. The reason why this person was special was because he had taught 2 students. No, it shouldn't be said that he taught her. It was because both of them had attended his classes. One of them was Qin Mo while the other was Fan Zibing, Fan Jia's brother. However, it was the same 2 people. The first one felt that his teaching style wasn't suitable for him, so he ended his elective early and chose to attend another professor's class. The second one became his disciple. It had to be said that both of them were outstanding in the field of psychology. However, the former was still weaker than the latter. This had always been Kuang's evaluation. In his heart, a person without any weaknesses was the strongest. Although Qin Mo's aptitude was better. However, he was no match for Fan Bing. Chapter 1193. Zibing had been able to leave a psychological suggestion for Qin Mo before he died. This wasn't something many people could do. In Kuang's eyes, a psychologist who had been hypnotized was useless. He didn't take the people who were stationed at the borders of Huaxia seriously. After all, they had successfully transported a huge batch of goods in the past. Who would have expected the recent increase in security? With his methods, his men had been captured. Kuang had heard that the ones who had captured him were a small team from the nearby army. He had heard that there was a person with good disguise skills. But regardless of whether they were good or not, they had dared to touch his men. He had only touched one of their soldiers. He wanted to let them know that they shouldn't keep trying to cut off his source of income. Kuang was good at psychological warfare and was clear about the defense. China was vast. The uninhabited zone was many meters long, and there were some places that couldn't be detected by radar. As long as they didn't enter China's airspace, it wasn't a problem to drive a military vehicle into the uninhabited zone. However, they were strict in terms of weapons. Kuang had already thought of a solution. It was just a few guns. This was the border after all. He wanted to let them know that China couldn't do anything to him at the moment. With so many hostages, Kuang wasn't afraid of anything. Furthermore, he had wanted to find Qin Mo for a long time. It was time for the person who had caused him to lose a leg to disappear completely. Kuang narrowed his eyes, glancing at the poppy in his hands. When he lifted the corners of his lips, It was a smile, but it gave off a sinister vibe that came from the depths of his heart. Fan Jiao was standing in front of the computer, tapping on the keyboard. Kuang walked over. "How is it? Have you found the person?" "Not yet. I don't know what happened to him. He seems to have disappeared." Fan Jia's eyes were filled with disgust when she spoke. Kuang was wearing a white coat, his gait a little crooked. "Are you sure this person means something to Qin Mo?" "I'm sure." Fan Jia's eyes were still filled with sadness. "I don't know what he saw in her. She managed to get close to him just by dressing up as a man. Now that I think about it, this woman is rather scheming." Kuang glanced at Fan Jia. "Don't use your unnecessary emotions. The most important thing now is this person. Kidnap her so that Qin Mo will be captured." "Yes, master." In front of Kuang, Fang Jia had toned down her arrogance. After all, she hadn't been very successful in her mission in Huaxia. Originally, he thought that he could use those people on the internet to carry out business transportation. She hadn't expected Z to suddenly appear and mess up her plans. In reality, Fan Jia still didn't understand. Wasn't Z supposed to be dead? Why did it appear in Huaxia? In the end, Master found a way to find Z's base. She still hadn't grasped the opportunity and let Z kill a few of her people. In the past, her master always said that she was the most talented. But now, Fan Jia's eyes dimmed as she started typing again. Since she couldn't catch Z, she wanted that guy to die first. She recalled the youngster she had seen in China and instinctively disliked him. Now that she thought about it, her dislike wasn't without reason. Pretending to be a man to play esports was just to get Qin Mo. It was really disgusting. Just as Fan Jia was typing, Kuang's phone rang. He turned his head, his voice calm. "Have you arrived?" "Yes, boss, it's very simple. The defense here isn't much." In the forest, an Asian man held a phone in his hand. He was wearing a camouflage uniform and had already killed one of the guards from a certain team. He stepped on the bright red blood, and the person lying on the ground seemed to be trying to sound the alarm. Once again, he slit his throat with a military knife. Kuang listened to the commotion on the other end of the phone and smiled. "Not bad. We met a guard squatting in the forest. I have to say that the uniform boss made us wear is very useful. He thought we were from the neighboring team." The man looked like he was from Huaxia, but his accent was foreign. Kuang was very calm. "You have to be careful. You just entered the outer area. Think of a way to enter the inner area. Tell them that you were here, and leave some blood there." "Okay." The man smiled, licking the blood off the handle. "Let's go, brothers. Let's kill a few more people for fun." This group of people from the ungoverned land seemed to be born fearless. They didn't care which country they were at. In their hearts, it didn't matter if they were here. Many people were afraid of China's soldiers, but they weren't. "There seems to be light over there. It should be the other team that the man mentioned." One of the men with a tattoo on the back of his hand jumped down from the tree, pointing towards the 9 o'clock direction in the forest. His lips curved into a bloodthirsty smile. It was obvious that he had the best eyesight in the group. Usually, the ones with the best eyesight were the snipers. "What are you waiting for? Let's let them feel the aura of death." It was just a group of 5, but they were arrogant as they drove into the uninhabited area. Honestly speaking, they weren't weak, but they were relying on their geographical location. Regardless of how strong the Chinese soldiers were, they might not be able to catch them in the forest. It was a piece of cake for them to harass them, kill a few people, and teach them a lesson. The sky darkened. In the forest, Bojo bent her back, her long legs moving forward skillfully. She just had to be wary of the bullets flying from the highest vantage point. She knew that the person was around her, waiting for her to fall into the trap. Bojo turned and used a tree to block herself. She started to lock onto the target again. If she was the sniper, which tree would she choose? The sniper, who had been hiding in the tree for a long time, had already adjusted his breathing. He had even lowered his body a little. His gun could almost sweep a few meters in all directions. As long as there was any movement, he would be able to see it and shoot. The technical soldier wouldn't be able to escape. However, the sniper was impressed by his courage. Even if he had gotten in because of his connections, He wasn't a coward since he had accepted his challenge. It was a pity. He would have to tell that person how important shooting was during a mission. The sniper's marksmanship was good, and he was one of the best among the recruits. Hence, he was confident. Chapter 1194. However, the newbie seemed to have forgotten something. A sniper was most afraid of being discovered and attacked from the back. Of course, most people wouldn't have thought of this. But Bojio was different. When she had been at the Fifth Avenue, she had relied on her judgment of the best vantage point to move through the darkness with ease. Besides, she was an assassin. Be it in the game or in real life, she was best at attacking from the back. The sniper obviously didn't know that in the esports industry, people like to call him the shadow killer. Under normal circumstances, the so-called shadow killer would sneak around to your back and give you the most fatal blow. Naturally, the sniper wasn't aware of this. In his mind, he had always been a technical soldier. A thick layer of clouds started to cover the sky above the forest, covering the entire moon. The night sky was as dark as ink. All that could be heard was the sniper trying his best to control his breathing. The sound was very soft and weak. It was a special adjustment made by the sniper to hide himself. He had his own calculations and his concealment skills were excellent. Indeed, Bojio didn't notice him. But when the youngster realized that he couldn't see where the sniper would cover him, he started to attack from the sniper's position. The wind in the forest was icy, freezing the air around him. There wasn't a single sound in the surroundings, other than the occasional chirping of insects. The sniper didn't move, observing everything in front of him. He might not be better than his opponent in terms of technique, but he would definitely be stronger in battle. Especially in such a forest, it wasn't just important to be familiar with the terrain, the natural conditions were also important. The temperature was cold today, making it hard for him to breathe. Besides, the quieter the surroundings, the more advantageous it was for him. That way, he would be able to see even the slightest movement in the grass. Just as the sniper was thinking about it, he saw something moving in the bushes in front of him. He raised his gun abruptly, adjusting his shooting angle, locking onto his target, and firing with unerring accuracy. The bullets used during the drill were more like rubber bullets, producing a low and dull sound that couldn't be heard if one wasn't close. The sniper knew he had hit the target, the bushes quietened down. He adjusted the line of sight again, and saw a wild rabbit lying there. It was gray with a little bit of white. It must have been digging in the haystack just now. Now that it was lying on the dark green grass, it was discovered. The sniper furrowed his brows, feeling that something was amiss. He adjusted his direction and scanned his surroundings. There was nothing. He was probably making a fuss out of nothing. While the sniper was thinking about all this, he didn't notice a faint black shadow swiftly circling behind him from the moment he raised his gun to shoot. The path it took was also very tricky, as though it didn't even cause a ripple in the water. The figure raised her eyes, and the moonlight shone into her eyes. There was a hint of evilness at the corner of her mouth. What a pity for the little gray rabbit. However, throwing stones to test the waters was indeed the fastest method. With that thought in mind, Bojio turned sideways and quickly hid herself. She was still wearing a black mask on her face. Even when she was lying on the ground, she didn't remove her mask. Chapter 1195. She tilted her head to the side, making one last adjustment to the distance. There wasn't a single person around, only the moonlight from Tsinghua University illuminating the youngster's side profile. Her tall nose bridge and bright eyes seemed to be unable to be suppressed by the darkness. Bojio wasn't best at long-range shooting, but she had seen the Almighty's demonstrations. Breathing was important, but it was equally important not to shoot recklessly. The sniper on the tree still did not understand that once the sniper fired and missed the target, it meant that the battle was already over. That was because the sniper's greatest fear was to have his position discovered. It was obvious that the shot that landed on the gray rabbit had forced the sniper into a passive position. They were all from the military, hence, they understood this point. Of course, the sniper hadn't expected someone to be lying in the bushes. He estimated the terrain and prepared to leave his current position. But at this moment, The first gunshot he had ever heard in his life rang out behind him. The speed was so fast that the sniper's eyes widened in disbelief. There was a flash of light. The sniper quickly moved his spear. But it was too late. The white smoke that rose from his body had revealed many things. Moreover, after he had been hit by the blank cartridge, he had felt a tremor and pain in his chest. If it had been a real bullet, his heart would have been blown apart. Did that person calculate that he would turn around, and that's why he shot down at this position? The impact from the blank cartridge caused him to take a step back. He had to grab onto the tree trunk to prevent himself from falling. It was a tricky angle. There was only a slight gap and he would have been killed in one shot. The sniper held onto the tree trunk, astonishment and shock filling his heart. He couldn't believe how the person had managed to find such an angle. Just because of a technical soldier? But the truth was that he had been killed in one shot. He hadn't been able to react in time. He hadn't even considered the possibility that the person had predicted his position and moved behind him to ambush him. He had been like a ghost in the night, silent. If the person hadn't fired at him, he wouldn't have been able to detect his position. This feeling made the sniper feel like he was really on the battlefield. It was over before it had even begun. If it was on the battlefield, he knew very well what it meant for their team's backline sniper to be eliminated like this. This meant that his blind confidence would kill his teammates. He thought he was aiming at someone, but in fact, he was already being aimed at. It was said that shooting was the key to becoming a sniper. In fact, a good sniper tested too many things, such as a stable mental state and an analysis of the situation. However, he did not manage to do all of this today. The sniper froze on the spot, his entire body numb and stiff, as though he had lost all his strength. He leaned back against the tree trunk. Thinking about how terrible his previous performance was, he felt his face burning. He didn't even know what kind of situation his opponent was in, yet he could easily make a judgment. The facts proved that even if number 10 had connections, he was also capable. Chapter 1196. At this moment, the youngster, who had been lying in the bushes, stood up. She shook off the night dew on her body, her hair still carrying the scent of fresh grass. If she hadn't pulled her black mask away, it would have been hard to tell that there was another person there. The sniper watched the scene, his heart flipping over. Sweet, sour, bitter, and spicy. He didn't know what to feel. The youngster raised her gun, glancing over at him. It was obvious that he had won. The sniper chuckled bitterly, sliding down the tree trunk. In reality, the sniper was at a disadvantage against Bojio, who specialized in cutting the backline. As an esports assassin, Bojio was adept at fighting in the wild, capturing people and hiding in the bushes. Bojio didn't intend to stay in the forest for long since it was a deserted area. The temperature was freezing. Moreover, she wanted to use her new car to make the Almighty happy. She might not have experience in love, but she understood the process. 3 conditions: heat up, heat up, heat up again. That was the only way to marry her. With that, she pulled her black mask over her face, preparing to leave. The sniper also saw through the young man's plan. He had lost this match and he would tell everyone about it. Through this match, he realized that the real battlefield might not be what he had imagined it to be. At this moment, neither of them noticed the silence in the forest. It was as though a ferocious beast was staring at them from the depths of the forest. It was the group of mercenaries that had reached the area. The 5 of them were extremely fast. The way they carried their spears was no different from the local soldiers stationed there. Since it was night time, they couldn't see each other's features. Hence, it was impossible to tell which country they were from. The only distinguishing feature was their military uniform. Just as the sniper was about to leave, he saw the figure moving past him. He paused in his action of raising his spear. Then he turned his head and grabbed the young man. He lowered his voice and said, "There seems to be someone here. Is it because of the military exercise again? Did they send scouts here first?" Bojio didn't think much of it. She smiled. "Let them scout, it's not a big deal." It was a habit to carry a backpack on one's back. But the moment she lowered her head, she seemed to hear something. The sound was very subtle, making it impossible to determine the exact location of the other party. But for one thing, was it like a language? Bojo couldn't hear it clearly, but she frowned suddenly. She took a step back in the direction she was originally heading towards, and leaned towards the direction where the voice was coming from. The sound of her footsteps was very soft. Only the sound of her clothes brushing against the grass could be heard. It was as if the night wind was blowing, very quiet. At that moment, the sniper finally witnessed the youth's ability to hide in the forest. It was so quiet that even his footsteps seemed to be judged according to the terrain. All his movements were hidden in the night. Not everyone he knew could do that. The closer Bojo got, the clearer the sound. However, the clearer it was, the easier it was to be discovered. The sniper was right behind her. The two of them had no idea what kind of danger they were about to step into. Chapter 1197. Bojo tilted her body and bent her waist slightly, so that she could hear the sound more clearly. But what came faster than the sound was the sudden smell of blood on the tip of his nose. That's right, it was the smell of blood. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be any smell of blood here since they were using rubber bullets. It wasn't possible for them to cause any injuries. Bojo's frown deepened. At the same time, she tightened her grip on the rifle. At this moment, she heard the sound clearly. It was indeed a language, but it wasn't the language of Huaxia. It wasn't even the language of an ethnic minority. Instead, there was a mix of M and T languages. The person's voice wasn't loud either. She couldn't hear what they were saying, but she was certain that they weren't Chinese. They weren't Chinese. They were wearing their camouflage uniform. Bojo's heart sank. She wanted to pull the sniper back and retreat. But at this moment, the sound not far away suddenly disappeared. It was as though a conversation had come to an abrupt end. There were a total of 5 mercenaries. The person standing in the middle seemed to have heard something. He stopped abruptly and made a shushing gesture. The others also stopped talking. Not only that, but they also exchanged glances with each other. It was clear that they had sensed something. Another prey had come knocking on their door. That was the first reaction of the 5 of them. Then, under the cover of the night, they turned and scanned their surroundings. Finally, they confirmed a point and raised the rifle in their hands. The person with the Bluetooth earpiece tilted his head. The strongest person in front smiled bloodthirstily. He threw a military knife out. With a swoosh, it slid through the bushes and shot straight at a rabbit. The sniper watched as the military knife flew past him. The youngster's reaction was extremely fast. Before the military knife could reach him, he had already moved the rabbit over. But that wasn't the main point. The main point was that such a military knife wouldn't appear in such a place. It wasn't the equipment in their military unit. In the army, what weapons the garrison soldiers used, which models, and what their functions were all kept secret. Only their own people knew, and no one would pick up the model, even if it was a military knife. The people on the other side were very fast. They didn't give the snipers any time to react and rushed over. The mercenary was dragged by the youngster, and he maintained his posture without moving. His entire body had merged with the grass beside him, and even his face was buried in it. This also meant that they couldn't see where the other party was. At first, the sniper didn't understand why the young man didn't leave immediately. After all, Rabbit was in front of him. He knew very well that if they had moved just now, they would have been killed just like this rabbit. The newcomer seemed to feel that the situation was a little boring, and mumbled something. This time, the sniper's expression changed. This wasn't from his team, and he wasn't Chinese either. The sniper's reaction wasn't as fast as Bojo because of the difference in their perception of language. However, both of their hearts were the same. They couldn't sink any further. Chapter 1198. The person on the other side walked over to them. He even raised his rifle and touched the rabbit. The distance between them was less than a meter. The sniper's breathing tightened. It wasn't because he could see it, but because when someone was holding a rifle near you, you would definitely be able to sense the intense murderous aura. A rabbit. The person raised his rifle and picked up the gray rabbit. Bojo could understand his language and could hear the suspicion in his tone. Soon, the man raised his gun again and fired at the grassland. Bojo wanted to lift her head, but she lowered it once more. Fortunately, they were at a low altitude and weren't injured by the stray bullets. But the destructive power made her eyes sink. The other party was using a real rifle. That wasn't all, it was silenced. It was probably because they were in the forest and it had rained. Some of the defense systems at the border weren't perfect. This way, they wouldn't be discovered. Bojo probably didn't know what they were here for. But she knew she couldn't let them go any further. 1,000 meters away was China's first defense line. It was a common sight at the borders. Even the difference between Inner Mongolia and Outer Mongolia was due to this defense line. The inner circle was the country. Once they passed the defense line, there would be local villages. Even though there weren't many people living there, there would be scattered houses. This meant that there would be ordinary civilians living there. It was obvious what the defense line meant. Don't waste your bullets. The leader walked over and lowered his voice. Search and see if it's really a rabbit or someone else. The leader wasn't bothered. Even if there is someone, they will treat us as a unit. When we meet a patrol, we just have to keep quiet and let Bassoon answer, and we will be able to eliminate them. We'll leave after killing one more person, do you hear me? The leader was worried they wouldn't stop killing. After all, we have already entered China's borders. Once we are out of the forest, they won't be able to use their guns. Otherwise, it would be considered a breach of international law. But in this forest, once we are discovered, we will lose in terms of numbers. Hence, we have to restrain ourselves. After killing 3 people, we will leave our organization's name. This is the best way to provoke them, understand? Their hushed conversation traveled into Bojo's ears. After killing 3 people, they would kill one more? In other words, they had already killed 2 people? When? Where? If it was here, it was impossible for there to be no news to report. Could it be the regiment next door? After they had killed someone from the neighboring clan, they had jumped over here to continue killing. Organization? Bojo lowered her lids, a glint flashing past her eyes. It was cold. She thought she had a rough idea of which organization he was talking about. Recently, there was only one organization that they had made enemies with. It had to be said that these people were very fast and very agile. They were even bold and careful enough to sweep through the area just now. If it hadn't been for Bojo, she might have been shot even as she lay prone. After those people confirmed that there was nothing here, they didn't leave immediately. Instead, they expanded their search area. Such opponents were the most difficult to deal with. Chapter 1199. Fortunately, they had the terrain advantage. Both Bojo and the sniper were adept at regulating their breathing, maintaining the perfect disguise for a full 5 minutes. 5 minutes later, the 5 of them stopped searching. Looks like it's just a rabbit. The leader put away his spear and said, "All right, let's not waste any more time. Take advantage of this time to take some pictures of the situation here. When we get out of here, we'll upload them to the internet." It was common knowledge that there was no signal in the no man's land. The 5 of them spoke through the Bluetooth earphones in their ears. As soon as he heard they were going to take pictures, the sniper clenched his fists. Every checkpoint at the border was very important. Once these people took a photo and posted it on the internet, it would be very easy for them to be ambushed if there were any problems at the border in the future. The sniper understood this. It was impossible for Bojo not to understand. It was just that a head-on clash was extremely disadvantageous for them. After all, the other party was using real guns, and they had more people than them. Everyone was even wearing a communication earpiece. It wasn't that she hadn't thought of a one-on-one attack, but under such circumstances, it wasn't possible. The sniper also understood that if they made a sound now, not only would they be discovered, but they would also be of no use to the current situation. This was not because of anything else, but because the troops did not know that this group of people had entered. What loophole did he slip into without anyone noticing? Beads of sweat formed on the sniper's forehead. As the sound of footsteps rose, those people finally left the area around them. The sniper was the first to stand up, but the young man grabbed him back. Go back and tell Captain that there's an enemy invasion. Tell Captain Qin the general direction they're heading in. I'll follow them and mark the way. I have a USB drive on me that has the same origin as Captain Qin's USB drive. It will detect the enemy's presence within a certain range. Tell this to Captain Qin. Since they're here, we can't let them leave. The sniper's eyes darkened. No, you go back. I'll stay. It's more suitable for me to stay. You're a good sniper, but you're only suitable as a sniper. This time, it's obvious that you won't be able to use a sniper. I still have some dry goods in my bag that can be put to use. I hope that you can rush back to the base as soon as possible and inform Captain Qin. Now that the two teams are connected, they might not be able to gain any advantage here. These people will run to the next team. We can't let them roam around our base as they please. As an assassin, she had always treated the wilderness opposite her as her home. How could she tolerate some people killing their people and taking photos of them in her own territory? This was a provocation, and if this provocation was not suppressed, the other party would only become more and more unbridled. Besides, she could still remember how he had taught her calligraphy after watching a movie when she had been very young. Those who offend China will be punished no matter how far away they are. People often say that Huaxia is a country with a large population and a poor quality, etc. Yes, it was still developing, and it was indeed not perfect enough. Chapter 1200. At this moment, the lights on the second floor of the military base were still brightly lit. Someone was doing a psychological test and tactical evaluation. But he wasn't very focused. This was the third time Qin Mo raised his head to look at the door. Even though his face was still elegant, his brows weren't relaxed. The door didn't seem to have any intention of letting anyone in. The air was filled with the scent of a shower. The scent of the shower gel hadn't dissipated. But Qin Mo didn't know why he felt uneasy when he couldn't see that person today. He glanced at the clock at the side once more. Qin Mo reached out for his jacket and walked out of the room. He walked towards Bojio's dormitory. At this moment, Prince had just completed 10 rounds of weights. He was so tired that he was lying on the bed like a zombie. He hadn't eaten much for dinner, and just wanted to lie there. It was a pity that he wasn't lying in the right position. He was lying on Bojio's bed. When Qin Mo entered, he was the first person he saw. He arched a brow. Prince wanted to stretch his body, but when he saw the slender figure standing at the door, his arms stiffened. Even his yawn stopped. F***ck, who could tell him why the devil was here? Prince had always been a fearless person, but at this moment, he stood up instinctively and saluted. Captain Qin. Qin Mo glanced at him, his gaze landing on the single bunk bed behind him. Where did she go? It was a simple question, but it sent chills down Prince's spine. Even though there were many duels in the military base, there weren't many duels in the jungle. After today's phone incident, Prince had a basic understanding of the devil's methods. He had decided to betray his teammate. Since she was his family, he wouldn't be severely punished. Reporting Sugar Daddy. Prince bit his lips. Recruit number 10 was challenged by someone in the jungle. He should be in an uninhabited area outside the military base. Qin Mo's brows furrowed. **T, this was really **T. Even though he wasn't the person involved, Prince didn't think he was happy. It seemed like even if his brother won, he wouldn't be in a good state. With such a cousin, life must be tough. Prince's mind was filled with thoughts. At this moment, Qin Mo threw out another question. How long have you been in there? Prince didn't expect the other party to think about the time. If it was his previous instructor, he would definitely be furious. Sir, it should be more than 2 hours. Qin Mo tilted his head, stuffing one hand into his pocket. When he looked up, Ji Shitting's voice was heard. Even Prince, who was standing at the side, couldn't help but sigh. The other party was indeed handsome. Even someone like him, who had always won with his looks, felt a little inferior. Don't tell me this military unit selects people based on their looks? It's taking too long. This was Qin Mo's first sentence when he turned his head. For some reason, his eyes seemed to have dimmed. Prince didn't understand. Too long. She's good at taking a detour and fighting in the jungle. 2 hours is too long for her to eliminate a sniper. Qin Mo repeated himself because he was still analyzing the situation. Prince's mouth was agape. Honestly, Captain Qin, that sniper is the best rookie in the team other than Wolf. This is a battle, not a one-sided slaughter. Why did you say that he's a financial backer, and that you'll destroy him? Why did he have the feeling that someone had unknowingly shown off his little brother? Qin Mo looked at the night sky outside. He retracted his gaze and continued to ask, which direction did she enter the no man's land from? The west side of the training ground, the small forest. The moment Prince finished his sentence, the tall figure in front of him turned around. She didn't even look at his expression as she walked down the stairs. What did she mean? Prince was dumbfounded. At this moment, the sniper understood that if he continued to stay, he would only be delaying the rescue of his comrades. The military unit was only 1,000 meters away. He had to hurry so that he could pass the information to the military unit in time and save his comrades. Just as Bojio had said, she was in charge of tracking them and keeping them in the forest at the crucial moment. The forest at night was undoubtedly dangerous. The wind was chilly. Amidst the bushes, the youngster held her rifle and moved in a snake-like manner, silently catching up to the mercenaries. It wasn't because the mercenaries were slow, but because Bojio was too fast. Other than killing, their main goal was to collect information on the defense system. Hence, along the way, they used their phones to take pictures of every place with metal mesh. Of course, they couldn't touch the metal mesh because it was used to detect intruders. The moment anyone touched it, they would be electrocuted. This time, it was obvious that these mercenaries came prepared. They wore anti-electricity gloves and touched the iron net. Then they laughed. This kind of defense system really can't do anything good at the border. In the future, if anyone wants to take revenge on the Huaxia troops, they will have to wear an anti-electricity suit. The signal defense tower over there isn't bad. Another person raised his hand. Gotcha. Another photo was locked on his phone. There doesn't seem to be anyone here. We'll be inside if we go any further. Should we kill a few civilians? We've been walking for so long. I'm hungry, hahaha. Don't fight and kill all day. Have a meal and give them some fans. Bring our organization's products to them. That's the best choice. The leader raised his rifle. Are you done? It's done. Let's go to the other team. There aren't as many people here. Don't forget, we are still short of one person. After saying that, the leader was about to pass through the residential area of the nearby village and head toward the 147th Regiment. Previously, Bojio had mentioned that they couldn't allow anyone to pass through the defense net, because on the other side of the defense net, everyone was unarmed. The youngster's dark eyes looked down. Then he turned his body sideways and pressed his back against the tree. Then he pulled open the military backpack he was carrying. Inside was the only electronic car she had with her. She had wanted to give it to the Almighty today, but it seemed like she had to use it now. Chapter 1201. The youngster's side profile looked cold under the moonlight. The tear mole at the corner of her eye was very obvious, making her look like a fox immortal. Her fingers brushed past the palm-sized electronic car. She reached into the black scarf and pulled it up. Then she bent down and disappeared into the night like a shadow. There was fog in the forest. Perhaps she could make use of this. The youngster reached out to hold the military dagger at her waist. A glint flashed across her dark eyes. Then she controlled the arrow keys with one hand and headed in the opposite direction. The few of them were still in a conversation. When we came previously, we only heard that there was a regiment here. We never expected to meet a hidden unit. If news of this gets out, it will give the soldiers a lot of pressure. It will save them the trouble of trying to cross the border to capture us. Capture us? The leader laughed, his tone filled with disdain. With these people, which one of them is King's match? That's right, with King around, even if they cross the border, they will only be sending themselves to their deaths. The few of them burst into laughter. Their expressions were extremely arrogant and bloodthirsty. Right at this moment, a unique sound, similar to the sound of a gasoline cap being opened, entered their ears. But it wasn't normal for such a sound to be heard here. When they heard the sound, all of them stilled. Even their backs could tell that they were on high alert. Even though it was a small movement, it was enough to show that these people were indeed, as Bojio had said, they weren't easy targets. The leader was the fastest to react. He immediately looked to the right, and his face went blank for a moment. Actually, it wasn't his fault that his expression was blank. It was mainly because of the thing he saw. A red heart lantern. A small electronic car with a red heart lantern. F***CK. Was such a thing even supposed to appear here? The leader's lips twitched visibly. The four mercenaries beside him had an indescribable expression on their faces. That wasn't all. As the small electronic car neared, they could see the marks on the red heart lantern. They couldn't understand the Chinese characters at all. Of course, the shooter was the only one who understood, but he could only speak. "Boss, what is this?" The leader didn't answer. Instead, he narrowed his eyes, and a sinister aura overflowed from his eyes. There must be someone here. It wasn't a rabbit just now. Shoot. Before the electronic car could get close, the leader had already raised his gun. With just one shot, the electronic car was flipped over, and the red heart lights flickered. In the jungle, such a color of light was somewhat chilling to look at. "Boss." The person who shot the gun opened his mouth again. It was not because of anything else, but because the overturned electronic car had flipped over again. However, the lights were off, and it was quietly parked there, looking a little embarrassed. Someone is controlling it. The leader was not stupid. Go and find that person. Yes. The other two took a step forward. The electronic car moved again. This time, it was moving faster than before. F***CK. As soon as the word shooter came out of his mouth, suddenly, a voice came from the electronic car. "Mr. Chin, please unlock the voice password lock. You will have 3 chances." The 5 of them paused, and the expressions on their faces became more colorful. "Boss, is this car talking?" The leader didn't have time to react. The electronic car made a few more sounds. "Countdown to unlock the password begins. You have 10 seconds, 10. The shooter subconsciously waited for it to count to 9. Unexpectedly, the electronic car changed its tone and said lazily, 0. The corner of the shooter's mouth twitched. Was the 10-second countdown eaten by a dog? "Sorry, if I don't answer the correct voice in the specified time, I will explode. Sigh, I'm so sad." The electronic car circled around, as if it was really sad. It also seemed that the shot just now had hit its electronic circuit, and the wheels were a little paralyzed. Explode? The shooter didn't think much of it. He raised his hand and shot the electronic car again. Seeing that it didn't react at all, he said, "It's already broken and it still explodes?" The leader's eyes narrowed deeper and deeper. What's the point of arguing with an electronic car? Go and find this person. Go and find this person who is pretending to be a ghost. Yes. As soon as the shooter finished speaking, he wanted to turn around and leave. However, a loud bang rang out directly from his left side, causing his ears to buzz. The explosion was real. Although it couldn't kill anyone, it was enough to make 2 of the people inside lose their 5 senses for a moment. The remaining 3 cursed it, and wanted to go forward to drag them away. The one closest to the grass had just taken a step forward when a gust of wind appeared behind him. A gust of wind appeared behind him. Just as he was about to turn around and shoot, his neck was pressed against by someone from behind. Then a knife cut his throat. It was so straightforward that he couldn't believe that there was such a person behind him. He didn't even have time to look back before the other person let go of his neck. A soft and lazy voice was pressed against his ear, and only one word was said, 1. When did that person appear? Why didn't they feel it at all? And what did he mean by 1? The mercenary wanted to speak, but he could only mutter softly. He pressed against his neck with one hand and stretched the other in front of him. His trachea was cut, and his entire body started to twitch. He wanted them to turn back. It was just that this figure appeared at the right time. The people in front were already focused on the aftermath of the explosion and on their boss, who was affected by it. No one looked behind them. They hadn't expected someone to be so daring, appearing when there were 5 of them. Bojio made use of this time difference. If she had to describe it, it would be like killing someone while being invisible, and then retreating after killing someone. Her movements were like flowing water, like a phantom in the night. The moment you felt a sense of danger, it meant that she had already finished killing. Just like what Bojio had said, every hacker was a magician to a certain extent. Magicians were successful because they knew how to divert the audience's attention. The electronic car was a diversion point. The moment it appeared, Bojio started to move in the opposite direction. An ambush. Cutting off the back row. That was what she wanted to do. Chapter 1202. It was just that everyone who fought understood this. Having more people would give them a huge advantage in a real battle. Besides, Bojio was only left with a military dagger. Moreover, to a certain extent, the mercenaries had already sensed that there was someone else in the forest. The sudden explosion had caused the fierce-looking leader to cover his ears and curse in a low voice. He shook his head and pushed away the people who wanted to help him. His eyes were sinister. Find this person. Find this person for me. Boss Carrie. At this moment, someone had already noticed the person who was lying on the ground with his limbs twitching. The leader of the group glanced sideways and cursed. Then he began to fire wildly into the bushes. Bojio rolled quickly. If she had been any slower, she might have been injured by the stray bullets. She turned sideways and used the bushes as cover. Her back was pressed against the tree trunk. There was grass on the tip of her nose. She adjusted her breathing slowly so that she could hide well and find a chance to break through. At this moment, the mercenaries couldn't go to the residential area. They were successfully trapped outside the metal fence and in the forest. Bojio lifted her head and twirled her dagger. She was thinking about what the Almighty would do in such a situation. There were only 4 people left. One of them had been seriously injured. From the angle, he should have lost his hearing. However, his gun was still in his hands. He was a long-range shooter. The other 3 were completely unharmed. The most difficult to deal with was the leader. He was alert, quick and skillful. Most importantly, he was born with a crazy gene. He didn't seem afraid of death at all. While Bojio was thinking about these things, she had to pay attention to her surroundings. Even the slightest movement would mean that someone was approaching. The only advantage she had was the weather in the forest. It was foggy. But how was she going to break through or protect herself from now on? That was going to be difficult for her. A woodcutter couldn't cook without rice. She was defeated because the bullets in her gun weren't real. In the distance, the night sky thickened. When there wasn't any wind, the fog would be especially thick. This was the no man's land. It wasn't safe to enter the forest at this time. The humidity was too high and poisonous snakes would come out. Therefore, the army had a rule that unless there was a military demonstration, no one was allowed to enter except for the garrison personnel. Hence, when the soldier on night duty saw the person walking towards him, his originally bright eyes turned even darker. He clicked his heels together and gave a standard salute. Captain Chin. Even though Chin Mo was now a major general, the people here were used to calling him Captain Chin. Is there any problem? Chin Mo's words caused the soldier to pause. No, everything is normal. Even the infrared is normal. Normal? Chin Mo lifted his lids and looked into the dark night. He frowned again. Give me your backpack and gun. The soldier didn't understand why Captain Chin wanted his things, but in the military, he had to obey orders. Yes. The soldier untied everything at his waist and handed everything to Chin Mo. He watched as the man tilted his head and adjusted his shooting angle. With a click he said calmly, earpiece. Yes. The soldier didn't expect Captain Chin to even want his wireless earpiece. What was Captain Chin trying to do? Chin Mo took the black earpiece and put it on his left ear. At this moment, he seemed to have heard something. He quickly raised his gun and aimed it at the forest. Who's there? There was someone there? The soldier hadn't reacted. The person's breathing could be heard. It's me, one of us, out. The sniper who had fought with Bojio hadn't expected Captain Chin to be stationed here. He paused for a moment before rushing over. His lungs were about to explode from running. When he spoke, his chest rose and fell violently. Captain Chin, something happened. Someone invaded the no man's land. 10. Went to chase after them alone. They are heading north. Once they leave the north, they will reach the neighboring regiment and residential area. Chin. Before the sniper could finish his sentence, his shoulder was grabbed by someone with great strength. Who did you say went after him alone? 10. At this moment, the sniper was filled with self-blame. I should have stayed behind with him. He asked me to inform you that those people took many photos of the troops. He also asked me to inform you that both of you have the same USB drive. If the direction is right, you will be able to respond. Chin Mo didn't have time to ask why they didn't bring their earpieces into the no man's land. He also didn't have time to blame anyone because he knew that in order to protect the secret of the base and the national defense checkpoint at the border, he had to ensure that the intruders wouldn't be able to return. One of them had to come back to inform the others while the other pursued. But even though he knew at that moment, his mind was blank. His fingers trembled uncontrollably. Only by gripping his gun tightly could he suppress the uneasiness in his heart. Even Chin Mo didn't notice that his expression was filled with a bloodthirsty aura. The sniper was still talking, but Chin Mo didn't seem to hear him. Until the word USB drive appeared. Chin Mo glanced up. He told himself to calm down. It was at this moment that he had to remain calm. If he wasn't calm, who was going to fetch his little Bojio back? Chin Mo reached out and pressed his temples. It was too painful. It was so intense that his eyes turned bloodshot. The soldier at the side was frightened by Captain Chin's expression. He had heard that Captain Chin had been kicked out of the military previously, because he had been hypnotized by someone. That hypnotization was too scary. Once it was triggered, a person's personality would be too different from before. At that time, the higher-ups had been afraid of this, which was why they had removed Captain Chin's military uniform. But now, the soldier opened his mouth and called out, Captain Chin. But Chin Mo had already started speaking. Inform the neighboring troops to use all their forces to stop them. We will conduct a carpet search from the east, west and south. Think of a way to prevent them from leaving the border. If necessary, snipe them directly. Yes. The soldier touched his feet. The sniper looked at his captain. He switched on his black earpiece, his voice slightly hoarse. Take your guns into the forest and lock onto my position. I'll give you 1 minute to follow. Magician was still washing his feet with a towel in his mouth. Hunter was seated beside him. Their topic was basically about how to cover up their captain's relationship. Chapter 1203. Pa. This was the sound of a belt being buckled. Behind his waist was a gun and bullets. Ka. That was stabilizing. His fingers tugged on the jacket of his combat uniform. In the blink of an eye, it was draped over his body. Up until now, the two of them only had 25 seconds. During this time, they didn't forget to raise their hands and aim at the watches on their wrists. Wolf, who had also received the news, tilted his head and started to adjust his rifle. Many people said that if you hadn't been in the military, you wouldn't know how fast they were. Even if they were wearing shoes, it would still be beyond imagination. That was indeed the case. It wasn't just fast, it was the rhythm of their bodies over the years. Other than being fast, their movements were uniform. It was so neat that it was shocking. From the moment they received the order to the moment they arranged everything, Magician and the others only took slightly more than 30 seconds. The next moment, they moved out like wild leopards. At this moment, Chin Mo had already entered the forest. The soldier who was watching Chin Mo's back opened his mouth. He turned to look at the sniper, slightly worried. Will there be any problems? After all, Captain Chin wasn't in a good state. The sniper was relatively calm. It was probably because he had experienced real bullets today. He knew what to do. Follow Captain Chin's instructions, I'll report to the general. In the distance, in the dense forest, there wasn't any wind but the temperature was extremely low. If a person didn't move for a long time in such a situation, they would definitely feel cold. That's right, Bojio felt cold. When the fog rose, the temperature on the ground would be extremely low. In order to better disguise herself, she blended into the bushes. Her fingers were extremely cold. It could be seen from the color of her lips. But she couldn't care less about the cold. She had to think of a breakthrough because the four of them were already walking towards her. There was another way, which was to lure them into the forest. But that would mean that she would completely lose contact with the military. The information she brought back was from the north. The deeper they went into the forest, the further south they went. Moreover, the south side was the territory of another country. Hence, she couldn't lure them into the forest. Bojo thought about this. While the fog was still thick and they hadn't reached the forest, she stood up and grabbed onto the tree trunk. She swiftly climbed up the tree. The tree trunk could only be used as a support point. The higher she climbed, the more hidden it would be. But thanks to her quick reflexes, Bojo managed to react quickly. After the four of them arrived, the first thing they did was to sweep the entire bush. However, the people on the other side still found traces. It was obvious that someone had run over the bushes. These mercenaries weren't stupid, and the leader was especially difficult to deal with. He bent down and touched the fallen grass with his fingers. He narrowed his eyes and smiled at the empty forest as if he was teasing a cornered mouse. "Stop hiding. After you left the grass, there were no traces of you around. We didn't hear anyone leaving either, which proves that you haven't left. Since you haven't left, I've scanned the grass. There's no one here, so you must be hiding in the tree. Since you've climbed up the tree, it's not easy to come down." Chapter 1204. The forest was still quiet as though there was no one around. The leader wasn't satisfied with this. He hated it when someone pretended to be mysterious in front of him, especially when it was a little brat from China. An experienced person would be able to determine the size and height of the other party through the pressure of the bushes. The person who could create such a thing wouldn't be very old. But it was such a person who not only disrupted their rhythm, but also killed one of them. The leader's eyes were filled with hatred at the thought of this. Even if he had to leave early, he had to kill the little brat who had disrupted their plans. "Do you still want to continue playing hide and seek?" The leader smirked. "You should be the only one here, right? Let me guess, you don't have any other weapons besides a military knife. Otherwise, you could have used a silencer to shoot from afar when we didn't notice you. It seems like you have no other choice but to risk your life to kill us." As the leader spoke, he raised his gun and shot at the top of one of the trees. With a bang, the leaves scattered and the crows flew away. "Not this one." The leader laughed coldly. "It's okay, we have bullets. We can take our time to find him." With that, he gestured to the people beside him, one on the left and one on the right. He meant for them to split up. The other three nodded. They were excited about the massacre that was about to begin. From their point of view, if the other party was alone, he would be courting death. He dared to appear in front of them and ruin their plans, killing their people. It seemed like this little brat didn't know what kind of people he was facing. The leader of the group wasn't wrong. They had confirmed the range. Even if there were no less than 30 trees around them, they wouldn't be able to find him in 3 minutes. However, if they really wanted to find him, the four of them could find him in 3 minutes. But because of this, they couldn't move recklessly. But at this moment, suddenly, a military fighter jet flew over the forest. No, it wasn't just one. Other than this one, there was another one in the distance. That was because the fighter jets were breaking through the clouds and flying towards them uniformly. They hovered in the sky in a very large scale, and each of them was terrifyingly elite. There was a distance between them, and they were flying in a triangular formation, bringing with them a sense of deterrence. A total of 7, like iron armor, leapt into the eyes of the mercenaries. The flag of Huaxia was also printed on it, bright red and eye-catching. "B-boss, we've been discovered." Someone was so scared that even his voice began to tremble. It wasn't that he didn't have a future, but these infrared fixed-point fighter jets were really too scary. The leader sneered. "So what if we're discovered? There's no light above or below us. Do you think they can discover our location?" At this moment, the fighter jets issued a warning. "You have violated our territory. According to international law, Our country has the right to shoot you on the spot. Warning, put down your guns. Boss. One of them panicked. The leader slapped him. Listen carefully, this is just the first warning. According to international law, they can only shoot after 3 warnings. Do you understand? Besides, I'll say it again. How far are they from the ground? Do you think they can see us? Idiot. While saying these words, the leader also felt the pressure. He didn't know whose idea it was. Warning them from above? Was it to make them feel afraid? Whose idea was it? Of course it was Qin Mo's. The soldier who was worried about Qin Mo's condition was completely wrong. When it came to Bo Jiu, even if Qin Mo wasn't in a good state, he would force himself to be calmer. He would start from the mentality of the invaders. After entering the forest, he would order the headquarters through the earpiece and send out the fighter jets. This was to make the invaders panic, and buy some time. Boss, let's retreat quickly. The person who was called an idiot wasn't bothered at all. He just wanted to escape as soon as possible. The leader was unusually ferocious. Why are we running? There are still 5 trees left. Capture that little brat as a hostage. When we hold him, who knows if he's dead or alive? But the Chinese soldiers are fooled. With a hostage they will never shoot, understand? Go and find him. Yes. The leader was determined to kill Bo Jiu. Just as he said, there were only 5 trees left. Bo Jiu listened to his words and glanced up at the fighter jets in the sky. She knew this was a sign that the Almighty was coming. Her gaze deepened. She leaned to the left, leaning against the tree trunk. At this moment, she looked down at the tree, her tall nose bridge visible. One of them walked towards her. Just as he was about to reach her tree, Bo Jiu seemed to have sensed something. She raised her left hand. With a loud swoosh, a military knife appeared, slicing through the fog and stabbing downwards. The person had obviously seen someone on the tree. Just as he was about to raise his gun, the military knife flew over and struck his head. It was a one-hit kill. There weren't any mistakes. Both the angle and the timing were perfect. The smell of fresh blood filled the air. The leader was the first to twist his body, shooting towards the top of the tree. In a flash, the black leather belt in Bo Jiu's hands came into effect. That was what she had used previously. With a shake, she used the force of the impact to fly towards another tree. Even if her skills were beautiful, it wouldn't be able to eliminate the danger. Her position was completely exposed. Moreover, she had already handed over the military knife on her. Now it depended on her dodging methods and luck. Bo Jiu had handed over the military knife, because the USB in her pocket had lit up with a red dot. This meant that the Almighty was within 500 meters. She kicked with her long legs, using the force from the kick to counterattack. This move looked cool, and could also help her avoid the bullets to a certain extent. But it was extremely tiring. After flying 3 times, Bo Jiu's breathing was different from before. There was an obvious rise and fall in her breathing. Chapter 12:05. With that, he was about to rush forward. But the next second, the leader froze. It was not because of anything else, but because the person who was originally walking beside him suddenly fell backward. His fingers were still maintaining his walking posture. His mouth was wide open, and his eyes were still filled with panic and disbelief. But the man had already stopped breathing. There was no warning at all, but there was a muzzle on his forehead. Fresh blood filled the air like a fog. When it rushed to the tip of his nose, the person beside him raised his gun. Retreat! Retreat! The leader shouted, his body retreating rapidly. However, there were still people who didn't retreat to a safe position. No, it shouldn't be said that no one retreated to a safe position. The sniper's speed was too fast. The moment the first shot landed, the second followed closely. This time, it wasn't the head but the enemy's heart. There was a loud bang. The other person covered his chest with his hand. His pupils dilated, and the blood on his face quickly faded. The palm of his hand came into contact with the viscous blood. But because of his movement, he was able to keep his life. But that was all. He didn't get shot in the heart, but it still made him lose his ability to move, and the blood couldn't stop flowing. The leader saw that in just a few seconds, his 2 subordinates had fallen to the ground, and his expression changed completely. It was as if at this moment he felt fear. It was fear that came from the bottom of his heart, because he had never seen a sniper kill 2 people consecutively in such a short period of time, and with such high accuracy. Even if they were still moving, they weren't moving like ordinary people. Who exactly was it? The leader's chest rose and fell. He leaned against the tree trunk, breathing heavily. The mercenary who wasn't completely dead looked up at him, probably hoping that his boss would pull him over. But under such circumstances, he couldn't go out. That kind of shot followed by the next shot. Just who was it that got hit by the first shot? Only Bojio, who was standing on the tree, knew who it was. 300 meters away, the figure with a long rifle walked over. He was even faster than her. From top to bottom, his disguise was almost perfect, the same color as the forest. When he raised his gun to aim, he was like a perfect sniper. Smoke lingered around him, shrouding his slender figure, making it difficult for others to see him. But the strange thing was that there was a strange atmosphere around him, especially when he aimed and shot. It was as if a gun had drawn an invisible barrier. That was why there was that saying. Once the spear was erected, there would be no one within 800 meters. The leader was smart. He quickly realized that they were going to fail this time. He picked up the phone on the ground and quickly retreated. After the fighter jets locked onto the source of the gunshot, they all flew over like they were patrolling. This made the leader's scalp go numb. Needless to say, the other one's legs were trembling. "Boss, what should we do? It seems like we can't escape." "There's no need to run. Do you see what's ahead? We're only 1,000 meters away from the border. As long as we get there, even if we're discovered, they won't have the right to catch us," the leader said as he ran forward. The mercenaries ran especially fast. Even though they were in the jungle, they weren't ordinary people. They had a certain level of combat experience and knew how to walk on such a path. Rather than saying they were walking, it was more realistic to say that they were running. But they still had some equipment on them. This really affected their speed. Many of the bombs were thrown behind them in advance to prevent anyone from chasing them from behind. But when the bomb exploded, it also revealed their whereabouts. Bojio held onto the branch and shook her head. She reached out and patted her ears. She continued to use the belt to move forward. There was someone behind them. Even if they were on the tree, it was impossible for them not to notice him. "Boss, that soldier keeps following us. D***, he's like a cockroach." When the leader heard this, a ferocious expression filled his face. "Throw the bombs at the tree." Yes. There weren't many bombs left, but it was more than enough to deal with one person. Bojio watched as something flew over. She tilted her body and somersaulted, jumping down from the tree. There was a loud boom. The aftershock of the explosion caused Bojio to lose her balance. She bent one of her knees and rolled along the bushes. Then she stood up quickly. Her movements were fast, so fast that it was dazzling. But if it hadn't been for her skills and reflexes, she might not have been able to dodge the bomb. But Bojio knew that she couldn't hear anything at this moment. The youngster tilted her face and supported herself with one hand on the ground. Her eyes were as bright and deep as the stars. At this point, she already understood the other party's intention. After all, she was a criminal. She would often use all sorts of excuses to explain herself in lawless areas and make the police helpless. In front of them was the exit of the jungle. Once they left this place, they would no longer belong to China. When that time came, they would have to deal with these people according to international rules. Once they followed international rules, the governments of country M and country T would intervene. The criminal would be transferred to their own countries to be judged. When that happened, the whole world would know that China couldn't even defend against a few mercenaries. The deployment of the military would also be exposed. Hence, she had to think of a way to delay these 2 people. Bojio had already rushed out. She didn't follow behind them. Instead, she went around them. When the person in front saw that the figure didn't follow them, he smiled. It was rare for him to feel a murderous aura at this moment. "Boss, it hit. That person should be safe now. Don't forget that there is still a sniper. Until now, we still don't know where he is." The leader didn't slow down at all when he said this. However, There was no sound of flying behind them, which made them feel a lot more relaxed. Especially since the other person didn't have any burdens and didn't need to be on guard against anyone. Just as this thought entered his mind, before it could disperse, he heard the sound of the wind. Suddenly, he heard a gust of wind, and before he knew what it was, he had already been hit. There was a loud clang. Someone used a long spear from the side. The handle of the spear hit his head, and he fell to the ground. This time, there was no metal rod. There was also a long spear. Even if there were no bullets, as long as it was a one-on-one fight, it could be extremely explosive. The person who was thrown to the ground couldn't stand up, let alone grab a gun. His entire head was in a daze. The intense pain forced him to lie on the ground, arching his back. Yes, both him and the leader of the people running in front of them. They never expected the soldier who had been following them from the beginning to come out in such a manner. He held a long spear with one hand, and his face was covered with a mask. Only his eyes were exposed. The moment he raised his hand, the corners of his eyes shone with the coldness of the night moon. The leader knew that he couldn't turn back to care about anyone. It was useless. There was only one way left, and that was to run. However, what he didn't expect was that the youngster was the one who stopped his men. What stopped him was the red dot on his forehead that he was aiming at. In an instant, the entire forest seemed to have quietened down. There were no more sounds of running. Only the sounds of insects and breathing could be heard. The leader's fingers froze. He didn't dare to move, because he knew very well that he had become the opponent's target. If it was an ordinary sniper, the leader wouldn't be afraid. However, after witnessing the scene just now, he might not be able to escape from the opponent's shooting. The sweat on his forehead started to drip down the side of his face and onto the back of his hand. The opponent didn't say a word, but he didn't dare to move forward. His throat moved. He wanted to use a bomb the moment his fingers moved. A voice rang out in the forest. The voice was very faint. It was so faint that it made him widen his eyes. He had heard this voice before. Who do you think is faster, you or me? Until now, the leader still wanted to identify the person's position, but he couldn't. At this moment he heard the person's voice again. It was a little deep. The words didn't seem to be directed at him. Instead, it seemed like an order was given through the earpiece. 3 o'clock underground, gather the light. In an instant, the lights that should have been lit up when the fighter jets were descending were all shining in this area. The strong light made the leader, who had been in the forest for 7 to 8 hours, subconsciously cover his eyes. Even the youngster in the distance narrowed her eyes. She pulled up her mask and turned her face to the left. The light grew brighter and brighter. When the leader got used to it, he realized that he was already surrounded. The fighter jets in the sky were all aiming at him. The leader's throat moved. He knew that the real reason he couldn't escape was because of the sniper in front of him. If it wasn't for the infrared lock in his command, these fighter jets wouldn't have been able to discover him. He wouldn't have frozen there for 10 seconds. At this moment, the leader saw the sniper's figure clearly. That's right, it was just his figure. Because he walked out from the light. Standing against the light, he couldn't make out his facial features at all. He just held the rifle in one hand and walked over with the aura. The leader's arm stiffened again. Then he saw a pair of eyes that seemed to reflect all the light in the world. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.